TFA fam, what is up? What is happening? We are on to week 13 after what has been just an absolutely brutal week 12. Nothing seems to have went right unless you had Leonard Fournette and a couple other players, but it was just a pretty ugly day across the board. And this Browns-Ravens game signifies all of that and just a disgusting week. So let's move on to week 13 and see what week 13 is bringing, because this is actually going to be a pretty big waiver week, at least in terms of the running back position. But first, we start always at the quarterback position. So week 13, streaming options and ads for this week. We have one, Carson Wentz, rostered in 58% of leagues going against Houston. Today, he completed 27 of 44 passes for 306 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions for 22.34 fantasy points. The Colts take on a Houston Texans defense this week who yield the 14th most fantasy points to quarterbacks and rank 6th in pass DVOA on the season. Look, Carson Wentz has played really well this year. He's actually been a top 12 quarterback this year. I'm surprised he's still available in this amount of leagues. He played much better in the first half today against the Bucs than he did in the second half. But regardless, does get a Houston defense that can be had through the air. Next up, we have Taylor Heinicke. Obviously, he has not played yet, but he is rostered 35% of leagues. He does play tomorrow or depending on when you're hearing this, on Monday Night Football, so we have nothing on him. But he does take on a Raider defense that allows the 11th most fantasy points to quarterbacks and ranks 23rd in pass DVOA. They also allow the 13th most passing yards and the 4th most passing touchdowns on the season. Next up, we have Jimmy G. Roster in 34% of leagues, takes on Seattle. Didn't really have to do a ton today. Completed 17 of 26 for 230, 1 touchdown and 1 pick. The 49ers will travel to Seattle, take on the Seahawks pass funnel defense that allows the 6th most passing yards on the season, ranked 25th in pass DVOA. Didn't really have to do a lot today. We'll also have to see what happens with Deebo Samuel. He did leave that game, I believe, with a shoulder injury, but it didn't seem like it was anything too serious. But we'll have to monitor that. And then from there, we have Tyrod Taylor, who's rostered in 11% of leagues, takes on Indy. He completed 17 of 26 for 158 and 2 touchdowns and 1 interceptions. In a 14-21 loss to the lowly Jets. Taylor is kind of a middling QB2, and really what is a great matchup against a Colts pass defense that allows the 6th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. But it's just really hard to trust Tyrod Taylor. But like I said, the matchup is definitely there. And then after that, we have Justin Fields. He is expected to be back this week, only rostered in 21% of leagues. Like I said, he missed week 12 due to a rib injury. The Cardinals have been a pretty strong pass defense, ranking 4th in pass DVOA and 3rd fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. However, Fields, I think his running ability kind of makes him a viable option if he chooses to use it. Whatever he does, I think he's a guy that can get you 60, 70, 80 rushing yards, whatever he chooses to use it. So we'll see how this plays out at an at-home matchup against the Arizona Cardinals. And we should expect Kyler Murray to be back and probably DeAndre Hopkins to be back as well in that matchup as well. So those are kind of the quarterbacks that I'm looking at right now. Let's jump over to running back, where we got a lot to talk about here at the running back position. As we know, the big story of this week is going to be Dalvin Cook, who left on a cart. It sounds like it is a shoulder/chest injury. Not a whole lot of information right now. He is expected to get an MRI tomorrow. This very well, the way the players were acting, the way everybody was acting here, I mean, it seemed like it's a pretty significant injury. And if it is, it's Alexander Mattison season once again. And I was surprised of how available Alexander Mattison is. Only rostered in 33% of ESPN leagues, 40% of Yahoo leagues, but he did carry the ball 7 times for 21 yards and a touchdown. He also hauled in 2 of 3 targets for 7 yards for 10.8 fantasy points today. Now, like I said, Dalvin Cook leaving with that injury, but we've seen this before. We have seen what his ceiling is with Cook out. He scored 23.1 against Seattle and 26.3 against Detroit. And guess who they faced this week? The Detroit Lions. Like I said, the last time they faced them, he rushed for 113 yards and hauled in 7 passes for 40 yards and a score for 26 fantasy points there. So Alexander Mattison is an absolute must-add. Unload the fab, unload the number 1 waiver wire if he's out there. Alexander Mattison absolutely deserves to be rostered in every single league, because this could actually absolutely be a seasoning injury for Dalvin Cook, something we'll have to monitor. But regardless, I doubt he plays this upcoming week. And so Alexander Madison is an absolute smash play against Detroit. After him, I put Tony Pollard on here because he's only rostered in 60% of ESPN leagues as I'm recording this. And there is reports out there that Zeke could miss the next few weeks due to a knee injury. And just kind of getting him healthy. And, we've seen Tony Pollard last year. I mean, the guy has RB1 upside. Now, this is a tough matchup against Seattle, so that is something that definitely should be mentioned there. But Tony Pollard definitely should be added if he's available. He is much more owned over on Yahoo. But if he happens to be sitting out there, Tony Pollard is a must-add as well. Jamal Williams, 39% Yahoo, 46% ESPN. Swift left with a shoulder injury. It didn't sound like it's anything too major, but it's something we will have to monitor. He carried the ball 15 times for 65 yards and also was targeted 5 times for 18 yards for 13.3 fantasy points on that Thanksgiving Day slate. They do take on a Lions defense that has been absolutely terrible against the run. So if DeAndre Swift misses this week, Jamal Williams is a really strong RB2. Next up, we have Dontrell Hilliard. Now, listen, 23% rostered, but they are on bye this week, but he did rush 12 times for 131 yards and a score. Only was targeted 1 time, which was weird because they were trailing for most of this game. And last week, we saw him get 10 targets. So this wasn't utilized there this week, but we have now seen Hilliard score at least 16.2 fantasy points in back-to-back weeks. And the remaining schedule, once they do come off bye, is Jacksonville, at Pitt, San Francisco, and Miami. And it really doesn't sound like Derrick Henry is going to be back until at least January at the earliest, so there's no worry about that. So Dontrell Hilliard is somebody that I would be looking to add. Matt Breida's next up, 5% on ESPN, 23% on Yahoo, carried the ball 9 times for 26 yards, also hauled in both of his targets for 29 yards and a score, has now scored double-digit fantasy points in 2 of the last 3 weeks, and the Bills take on the Pats on Monday Night Football. The Patriots have really struggled against pass-catching running backs this year. They've allowed the third most receptions to running backs and the second most receiving yards, and they just got absolutely torched by Dontrell Hilliard in this one, so they could definitely be had on the ground. So Matt Breida, we saw Zach Moss get the healthy scratch last week. He really looks like the best running back they have. And now, granted, the Bills are a much more of a pass-first offense. They do not look to run the ball as much, but Matt Breida is being utilized out of the backfield as a pass catcher here, so I do like adding Matt Breida, and makes for a decent RB3 next week against the Patriots. Next up, we have Chuba Hubbard, 30% rostered on Yahoo. Listen, CFC only played 1 snap in the second half after rolling his ankle. It should be mentioned that the Panthers were getting absolutely wrecked here in this one. And it very well could have just been out of precaution, but he did roll his ankle. So if he was forced to miss time, Chuba Hubbard at 37% does make some sense. Now, so some of these other guys I have on here, this is a much bigger list than what we normally do. We normally only have a couple guys on here, but we're kind of getting into this point here, much like we saw with Alexander Madison today, where we should be rostering a lot of these backup running backs in case injury happens, right? It's kind of like that fire extinguisher in case that happens, break glass. It's exactly what this is. And so this is kind of the list for me of where I would look at these guys. And I think a lot of these guys should be rostered for me. Khalil Herbert absolutely deserves to be rostered. Terrific matchup moving forward, or matchups moving forward for the Bears. If anything happens to David Montgomery, Khalil Herbert absolutely should be rostered. Devontae Booker, something happens to Saquon Barkley. We've seen him be a useful running back in the event that something happened to Saquon. Ronald Jones, Sony Michel, Naheem Hines, Marlon Mack, Dearness Johnson, Samaje Perine, Kenyon Drake, all of these running backs to some extent, even Kenny Nwangu. Now, if Dalvin Cook is out for the year, he is 1 injury away from being the starting running back for the Minnesota Vikings, and he is a really explosive running back. Not a lot of people probably really know his name, but he did house call a touchdown today through the special teams, and is a really explosive running back, and he very well now could be the number 2 running back here in this offense. And so he is somebody that is kind of in 12-team leagues and above, 14-team leagues, is worth a look because he is very explosive and could carve out his own role in his own right. So these are kind of the list for me. The other one we'll have to monitor is Miles Sanders. He may have injured his ankle. They didn't really get any official report. He didn't really play as much in the second half after he limped off after a long run, which was super frustrating in a great matchup against the Giants. So we'll have to monitor that one if he is. Jordan Howard also missed this week with an injury. So Boston Scott, I guess, would make a little bit of sense, but we don't really know anything on that one quite yet. So let's jump over to wide receivers. Like I said, this is the absolute week for running backs. There's so many great options this week. Oh, I do have DJ Dallas on here. I did not mention him, but I do want to mention him because they don't play till Monday Night Football. I've continued to say something about DJ Dallas. I think that he very well could be the starting running back for the Seattle Seahawks. So he is somebody that I definitely am looking to add. So let's jump over to wide receivers. We don't really have a big list this week. It's not really anything exciting. Russell Gage is kind of the guy with he's only rostered 18% of leagues, 6 receptions on 7 targets, 62 yards and a score for 18.2 fantasy points. He was targeted 6. He's been targeted 6 or more times in 4 of his last 5 games. He also has scored double-digit fantasy points in 4 of his last 5. I think he's kind of a viable wide receiver 4 moving forward, especially with Calvin Ridley not being there. And so they're a team that they're going to have to throw the ball. They're going to be behind. They're always going to be throwing the ball. So I think Russell Gage does make a little bit of sense. The rest of the list we have here is Van Jefferson. He had a really big game today. 3 receptions on 9 targets for 93 yards and a score. But I will say 79 of those yards came off of the 1 reception that he scored for a touchdown. He continues to be a useful flex option on most weeks. And the Rams take on the Jaguars next week. And he has seen 6 or more targets in every game since week 7. So Van Jefferson is quietly just carving out a really solid role as a flex option on most weeks in this explosive offense. Kenny Golladay, Kadarius Toney. Kadarius Toney obviously did not play today. Kenny Golladay did. Both of them are rostered in sub 60% of both Yahoo and ESPN leagues. He was targeted 7 times, hauled in 3 of them for 50 yards. Toney did miss week 12, but we'll see when he comes back. But I think both of them are viable options. Now, the guy that I've kind of been talking about, and I want to highlight a little bit more here, is Tre'Quan Smith. He's not a sexy name by any means, and he's only rostered in 5% of leagues. And he this week 4 for 5 for 31, nothing all that special, but he really gets some great matchups moving forward. This Thursday, they take on the Cowboys, who he'll see the majority of Jordan Lewis because he plays in the slot. 70% catch rate and 90 passer rating allowed. The next week after that, they take on the Jets and Michael Carter, 78% catch rate, 99.1 passer rating allowed. Justin Coleman after that, 70% catch rate, 135 passer rating allowed. And then Miles Hartsfield, who has a 47.2 graded corner through PFF. So just matchup after matchup, terrific matchup for Tre'Quan Smith. So I think he's somebody that's going to continue to be a viable option on most weeks. And then Josh Reynolds, he was signed by the Lions, came out and played Thursday. He has that built-in rapport with Jared Goff. And, we saw it this week, 70 yards and a score. And, this isn't a sexy, again, not another sexy name, somebody that I think has a massive ceiling. But I think, in a pinch, they don't really have anybody else. It's Amon-Ra St. Brown and Khalif Raymond, and obviously and especially if DeAndre Swift's out, this is another pass catcher that they're going to be missing. So Josh Reynolds does make for an interesting ad. Next up, you have other guys like A.J. Green, T.Y. Hilton, Laviska Shenault. All these guys are just kind of, I think, wide receiver 4-5 range. Same thing with Deshaun Jackson. He had over 100 yards and a score, but I think he's very boom or bust. But does get a great matchup against Washington this week. Randall Cobb is on bye. Marquez Callaway is just kind of a touchdown or bust. And then Rondale Moore, Mr. 2-yard ADOT. And then the rest of these guys over here are just really deep league stashes just because there's nobody we can truly trust. But I think in 14, 16-team leagues, these guys at least deserve some sort of look. Moving on, let's go over to the tight end position. Logan Thomas is supposed to be activated this week. Supposed to play tomorrow against the Seattle Seahawks. Only rostered in 60% of leagues. And then from there, we have Cole Kmet, who, had a really big week, only rostered in 13% of league, 8 receptions on 11 targets for 65 yards. However, he does have a tough matchup against Arizona, allowing the fewest fantasy points to tight end position, only allowing 3.9 fantasy points per game on the season. So not a great matchup for Cole Kmet, but if he's going to see this kind of targets, I don't really mind adding him. He's had at least 50 yards receiving in 2 of the last 3 games as well. Jack Doyle, quietly, or at least not this week, but even before this, has been getting some opportunities here. 6 receptions on 7 targets for 81 yards and a score. Has seen at least 5 targets in 3 straight weeks, and the Texans have allowed the 4th most fantasy points to tight ends. So I think he's a really strong streaming option this week. And then in Brevin Jordan, he's somebody that I've kind of talked about the last couple of weeks that's getting a little bit more opportunities. Listen, the Texans are absolutely done. They're not going anywhere whatsoever. And so I think they're going to continue to give Brevin Jordan opportunities here. Somebody they drafted this year, kind of a player that we were surprised that went as late as he did in the draft. Thought he would go a little bit higher, but 3 receptions, 23 yards and a score. He is getting more involved. He scored 2 touchdowns. He scored at least a touchdown in a game twice over the last 4 weeks. So Brevin Jordan is quietly carving himself out a little bit of a role here. And then that kind of makes up the list for tight ends this week. Like I said, I think this week is all about the running back position this week and when it comes to the ads. So let's hit some listener comments, and then we will get out of here. Alexis, my team was a shit show today. Welcome to the club. Najee, Chase, Waller, and Barkley combined for 25 points. Mitchell had 27 on my bench, lost my first place. And my lead in points for. Well, this is only 1 week, Alexis. I think that, these weeks happen. I was right there with you. A lot of people were right there with you. This is just a really, really rough week. Who's the backup for Hilliard or Foreman? Right now, it's kind of those two guys. I don't think there's anybody past those two that we really need to be all that concerned with. Right now, it's basically Hilliard and the Foreman show as things currently stand. They have a ton of players. They've been working in and out of the waivers or through their practice squad. I think they made like 14 moves on Tuesday for the Texans, but they are on bye this week. So we'll see if they do anything else past this. Ugly is right. Put in waivers for Jamal Williams and Alexander Madison. Who should I focus? Absolutely Alexander Madison, Alexis. Alexander Madison absolutely has league winning upside. I know that word gets thrown out a lot for a lot of these guys, but he is absolutely that. If Dalvin Cook is out for the year, he is 100% somebody that will be a strong consideration every single week as an RB1. Ronald, what is up? What is going on? Walito looks like Cook will miss at least 2 weeks. Yeah, I would assume at the very minimum, he very well could be done for the year. I don't know. We'll see on this injury. There's been differing reports out there, possibly, fractured ribs and, possibly, punctured lung or anything like that. Hopefully it's nothing like that, but, got carted off. So you don't want to see that. I got Matt's this week when someone dropped him in the waivers. Let's see. Oh, Madison. Yeah. Excellent job there. Tim J, after Hilliard performance, should he be started in lineups? Yeah, depending on matchups. And like I said, the first matchup they get coming out of the bye is against Jacksonville. So really solid matchup here for him when they come off bye. Week 14, I think he's somebody that we could kind of take a look at. He continues to be involved in the passing game. He was not nearly as involved this week as he was in previous weeks, which I was somewhat surprised with here on that. But I mean, he got it done on the ground, so he made up for it. I think he's at. I would say it's too early to tell. In terms of this is already in week 14, but I would say he's probably going to be a pretty decent RB2 in that week, unless barring they don't do anything else. Uzi, how long? CMC back after bye. It's a basketball type injury. I just read. Thank God. Yeah, it's good they're coming off bye. So at this point, I think he's going to get a little bit of time to rest. So it's not the end of the world with this one. I don't think it's that serious. I think it had more to do with the fact of him being them just getting absolutely steamrolled in that game. Does anyone know if fantasy app autopilot mode is any good? I have no idea. I have never heard of that. No, I would never want to do that. I started Hurts over Dak because of Fantasy Pros great projections. Yeah, that was a tough one. I mean, the thing with Dak, the thing with Dak was it made some sense because the fact they were missing so many of their weapons in that matchup, not having CeeDee Lamb, not having Amari Cooper really hurt. And then with Hurts, I mean, Jalen Hurts has been a walking QB1 this year. I mean, he has been one of the most consistent quarterbacks in the league. However, this was just not the case. I mean, he still got it done on the ground. He had 70, 80 yards rushing. It's just he just couldn't do anything through the air. They only scored 1 touchdown, and that went to Boston Scott, which was super tilting for people that had Miles Sanders, and that for people that played Miles Sanders in DFS, that he got. But I think there's better weeks ahead for Jalen Hurts, and Dak should have all of his weapons back this week. It sounds like Amari Cooper is expected to return tomorrow to the facility, and so that'll be good news on Monday. And then CeeDee Lamb should also be back for Thursday's game against the Saints. So, I think Dak will be a great option against the Saints. It almost hurt next week because they playing the Jets. I don't mind that either. That is a solid matchup. I haven't even started thinking about week 13 and kind of matchups and everything else quite yet. That'll be coming the next day or two. But that is also a solid matchup. We know the Jets can be had on the ground, through the air. It doesn't really matter. The Jets are fucking terrible. The guy I'm against right now needs Lamar Jackson to do good to beat me, but I have Mark Andrews playing, and Lamar Jackson just threw a touchdown. But he threw it to Mark Andrews, so I ended up getting more. Yeah, I'm not watching the game. I don't have it on right now because I'm doing this. But this game has been absolutely brutal. The Ravens and Browns game has been disgusting. But it's pretty much like what this week has been. Just absolutely brutal for a lot of different players. So I'm hoping week 13 is better. But anyways, we will get out of here on that. I appreciate everybody checking out the video. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button for future content. I really appreciate all the support we've been getting. And I hope, let's hope for a better week this week, because it can't be any worse than what this past week was. And like I said, welcome to Alexander Madison Smash Week, because this is the week to add him. Like I said, slam all that waiver, that fab budget that you have left on him. Throw in the number one waiver ad, because if he's sitting out there, he's an absolute must add. So, anyways, I hope everybody has a good rest of the night. Hope everybody has a good Monday and a great week. We will catch you guys again here very soon on our next one. Have a good night. Peace.